This is a video roundtable sponsored by the National Alliance for Media, Arts and Culture. We extend this platform to all of our members to come together and have discussions and work through ideas. We did a Future of Storytelling series on this platform, talking about Black Lives Matter and the future of storytelling, women and girls in the future of storytelling, and bringing practitioners and theorists and funders and activists together to figure out what stories still need to be told and how the system that through which we're telling stories and making art may itself be broken. Because the big idea here is to make sure that the structures that we are investing in are not the biggest part of the problem moving forward. And how much do we need to look internally before we just start willy-nilly funding people to make movies? It's like, look at the process that's going on there, and are we actually just deepening those entrenched, misogynistic and sexist and racist structures that the stories are actually trying to transcend. So these conversations are hoping to just get things started, bring people closer, and help, raise awareness of the work that's being done across the country and around the world. So when Imani came through our Creative Leadership Lab and then called me about Debtfair and told me about the Whitney, I was like, do we need to gather people? What's the gap now in this as you prepare, and what do you want the world to know about what's going on here? So I know the people that subscribe to our e-bulletin may be different than the ones that are already involved in your networks. And so this is a way to kind of do some interdisciplinary awareness raising and get us in solidarity with each other's movements and our creative work. So in that frame, it's like, tell the people about Debtfair, what's needed, how they can get involved, and the people that couldn't be on this call can now kind of share in that goodness. That's me.
I could say something about Debtfair. So basically, we're the core members of Occupy Museums. Imani, Tal, and I met at Zuccotti Park in 2011, and we, the group Occupy Museums has been concerned with calling out the institutions, art institutions, primarily the big famous ones in New York, like from MoMA to Met and Guggenheim and other institutions, Whitney, for the way that they're involved in structural economic inequality, social inequality, from the way that the philanthropic support of the organizations is tied into just pretty much all the issues that activists are concerned about today, like dirty energy and climate change, and and all the way to all kinds of racial inequalities, colonialism, the roots of colonialism that continue to this day, all those things. So we basically, Occupy Museums is not a one-issue group. It's like many issues connected to art institutions in a way that this structural inequality continues through them to our present day. We did many actions through 2011, 2012, into 2013. We had some interesting stuff that we did in Europe. That's kind of another story. But then at some point we turned our attention to the art community itself, which is kind of like the big primary community which supports the museums, right? As people that go and see the art, and also the people that are sort of aspiring to feed into the museums. And so there was a really important project called the Rolling Jubilee in 2012. It was by Strike Debt, which is a group that came directly out of Occupy Wall Street. And it was about kind of trying to find a way to, relieve or, spark people to think differently about debt, right? Because debt, after 2008, there's a real ethical problem with debt. And before 2008 also, but it kind of became obvious. So we were inspired by this Rolling Jubilee, which was people very quickly bailing out other people out of debt. Usually in the beginning it was medical debt. It's kind of complicated to describe, but they were just like this big online popular bailout. And we thought, like, can it be brought over to the art world somehow? So I started first with, because I think a lot about money, I started with very individualistic thinking. Like I started to create a system, could artists, basically could collectors buy debts from artists and bail people out? And then I didn't get that far in the system. And then I started working with Tal and Imani on it. And we decided, the first thing we decided was that it has to be done collectively. Like you can't speak about debts unless you're making collectives. You know, and in a way on our side, as a group, a collective that struggles and tries to make this work. And also on the side of artists and debtors, all of whom only exist in communities, right? And the funny thing is that debt is like a negative community because banks bundle debts together until you can never figure out what the hell's going on in those bundles. And that's how they securitize them and cover their own asses, right? So, so we kind of saw these kind of parallels between these things. I guess that's mostly what I wanted to say, to sort of maybe throw the ball to Imani, add anything about it from there.
Yeah, so we, over, the last few years since 2013, we've been thinking about Debtfair. We've really expanded our own framework for what Debtfair is and what it's concerned about and what it can do. And we've realized, one of the largest hindrances to addressing debt is the fact that debt is extremely abstract. And the systems that create debt and that turn debt into a commodity are extraordinarily abstract and confusing. And the average person doesn't understand that, what this is, how debt could be a commodity, and how they fit into that, and how their own lives, their own personal struggles, their own hopes and desires and fears and futures are actually all tied into a very extractive and predatory system. And we all understand, of course, on a basic level that knowledge is power, to be trite. And so we have to really unpack what debt is, both on a personal level and on a collective level, on a very localized level, and on a national level, and on a contemporary level, and on a historic level, and how all of these different facets of debt, all of these aspects are existing presently together. So when we talk about individual debt from student loans, we can't really separate that from colonial debt. We need to first start by bringing all of these pieces back together, and seeing debt for what it is, as this massive system. And then only then can we get inductive and go, or deductive and go from the general to the specific. So over the last few years, we've been really starting to think not just about student loans, right, and how an individual artist might take on student loans in order to try to achieve their goals in their career, in their life, for themselves, for their families. We've started to think about how every individual actually is impacted by debt. Even if you've been so lucky to not have taken on student loans, to not have medical debt, to not have credit card debt or car notes, you're still connected to the system, the predatory, extractive system of debt, through the fact that you are a citizen of this country, and you are connected through national debt, through the fact that this nation was formed through the debt of slavery, through the fact that this nation was formed and has been maintained through debt to the native peoples of this country, and is perpetuated and protected through this, consistently exploitative colonial debt through our so-called territories, like Puerto Rico. So that's where we've wound up now, and it's been a really interesting process. And maybe Tal can talk about how we've actually shifted the way that we have actualized Debtfair through the system of bundles, and through the creation of bundles, and the display of bundles on the wall, and how we've actually started to create, a model for trying to really map the connection between the individual and this much larger abstract thing, so that we can start to understand it.
Right. So thanks, Imani. I think that in general, we see debt is kind of the key to seeing American art today, and since the 50s, American household debt has quadrupled as a ratio of the GDP, and in the same time, the top 1% of America's income earners have more than doubled their share of the nation's income. And so, we see what's happening here. This is a cultural issue that's, of course, represented in policy, but it's deep in the core of what it means to be American today. And so, in creating Debtfair, we chose to expose the hidden layer of debt in the art world. And so, the way that we display the work is very literally in the walls of the museum. We cut out the first layer of sheetrock on the wall and hang the artwork in between the studs. And what we hang there are in fact bundles of artworks. And these bundles are determined not by let's say, surface level aesthetics of work, let's say paintings that are green or something like that. We bundle works based on the economic realities that artists share. And we find that out through a questionnaire that we send far and wide to artists around the country. And so in this case, Debtfair Whitney is going to be doing exactly the same thing. And we've got a few hundred artists who've already submitted questionnaires, and we need as many as possible because quite literally every single person who fills out a questionnaire is going to somehow be represented in the Whitney Museum. 30 people are going to be shown, 30 people based on their the answers to their questions, 30 people's works will be chosen to be shown in the museum. And then images of almost everybody else's work is going to show on screens or be available online in an online portal that will be available in the museum itself. So in this case, this is a way of making visible, and this is what artists do best, right? We make visible what is otherwise invisible, and what's so insidious about the debt crisis is that debt is so utterly shared and yet so utterly invisible and shameful, and we've built this edifice of shame around it to keep it invisible. And so, what Debtfair is attempting to do is not just make it visible, but make it almost a source of pride. Make it a point of solidarity, make it a point of union for the, hundreds of thousands of artists and millions, hundreds of millions of people who are in debt. And, I got to say, the statistics are mind-boggling. And if you look at debt, even just a little bit, if you just scratch the surface, you'll see this is a systemic problem. I mean, today, the average household with income, with debt, is paying 9% of their yearly income on interest alone. Just on interest, 9% of their yearly income. I mean, talk about holding people down. We've got a real problem here, and we're doing this, and we think that a lot of people need to be doing a lot of things. But Debtfair is one step, maybe, in the direction of creating solidarity among debtors using art.
You guys are blowing my mind completely, and the possibility of how something like this, especially at the Whitney, can pivot the conversations. I'm not sure they have pivoted yet. I mean, I don't think anyone is proclaiming, I'm powerful because I have all this debt. But together, there is, I think there's some hope in, switching things up. I don't know how that, how we leverage our collective debt for powerful system change remains to be seen, but this seems to be an incredible step in that direction. Can I ask you something kind of small and tactical about the bundles? I'm trying to visualize I love the idea of the stripping the sheetrock away and then, having the bundles there. But if your work is in a bundle, how is it viewed? How do audiences see the works that are bundled? Are they all, is it one at a time? I'm imagining like a package of work, and I'm not sure how I'm going to see everything in this. Do I open the bundle? How does that work?
Well, we leave the sheetrock exposed, and what we mean by a bundle is that it's hung salon style in between the studs. So the work is very, very visible. We create little platforms in between the studs that allows us to even place like little sculptures there, and we hang, of course, many two-dimensional works there. But yeah, the bundles themselves are in fact just exposed, like, the first layer of sheetrock cut out, exposed studs with paintings.
Okay, so one at a time. You don't have to kind of unbundle and see one work and the other. They're all out there.
No, and in fact, this is really an exhibition strategy that we've developed that of course metaphorically speaks to the layer of extraction that's inherent to the debt system, and also to the notion of exposure.
Now, thank you for that. And how do you plan to make room for the kind of narratives of lived experience that are going to undoubtedly, like, I already just want to talk to you all about all the debt that I've carried since I was your age. But in any case, how do you make room for those narratives and for people's deep emotional connection with the work because the Whitney is not generally the place to have those conversations. And is there some room or idea or design for actual conversations around debt? And
well, just to answer your question technically, we do have people, giving narratives about their debt. The question that we ask is, we have a whole bunch of questions and data that we collect, but there's one question which is, how does your debt and your economic reality affect your art? So it's kind of a little open-ended, and people can answer that with a paragraph or a long paragraph or whatever, and that's usually where the really stuff will pour out and people tell really interesting stories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's people who've, it's just everything you can imagine. We got, 100 people in Houston, and now we have hundreds, and we're starting to go through the answers. So that information is displayed on the website.
Okay.
If you look at our website, which is debtfair.org,
mm-hmm.
Right now, the way you have it is the first page, you see all this work, but instead of like directly looking at the artwork, like most art websites, like for example, Artsy or those kind of websites where you just have like little thumbnails of art, you actually see a little sentence about how much debt people are in, or some sort of emotive, description. Well, it's like sort of covering the artwork with a half tint. And if you hover over it, the artwork pops up.
Pops up, yeah.
But it's kind of like that. So that's what we're trying to say, is this like showing this layer, the hidden layer, and bringing it forward.
Right.
And when you click into the website, you can read through people's narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, for a lot of us, that's just like the core of the project, because
me too.
That's where all the stories are. That's where the experiences are. That's where the young person who's like, who just like has this debt that like all blustery, like, yeah, I'm going to make it work. And then if you're older, you're like, good luck.
Yeah. Right.
Old people who are, have been artists for 50 years,
mm-hmm.
still holding debt. And they're like, and they're talking about this journey they've traveled. In some ways, it's about the toughness it takes to get through, to be an artist in the U.S., who's not coming from money.
Oh, I know.
And so, yeah, it's everything.
It's so great. I almost hear like I want a radio component here, like to have a radio producer kind of just on site, because I think I am kind of identifying with the audience that comes to see the work, and kind of busting open the fact, of who the audience is for this work, and how do we reach the audiences that we really want to reach, and are they at the biennial? Or how do we travel this work outside those walls and collect the stories? I mean, this is a way where a partnership with the Alliance for Media, Arts, and Culture enables potentially moving image makers and radio producers to come in and capture and share those stories in some real ways, because it's art like this that taps into our collective imaginary about what could be possible, but then to make it real, and to be able to translate the power of those stories for folks for whom the experience of the artwork maybe, it's like how we find our point of entry, into and our own narratives through that work. This is going to happen. And where do we hold those stories? So I'm excited by what could happen there as other artists want to step into this.
Well, I think that we are the original thing that we did with Debtfair is do this artist meetup at Abrams Art Center in New York City, and we were toying with like an audio component there where people could actually share their stories. But none of us have the training for radio, I think that would be a really beautiful addition to this project, is kind of like some collaboration with an organization that can actually create and host audio let's say retellings of people's personal stories, because I think that it helps people connect. These personal stories really help people connect with the information. And we found also that images of people's work also helps people connect. Like for visual artists, we're all visual artists, and that's kind of like our entry into this topic. And so for us, this exhibition strategy of Debtfair is all about that, is all about kind of humanizing.
And also something I would add is that, there's an aspect that's always made me worry a little bit about capturing that kind of information, which is the sort of victim narrative of like, we're sort of finding these victims of debt, and it's a problematic to paint people that way, because in a way, like, artists in the US are the most privileged people in the world, right? Just like the people who can call themselves artists in the United States of America, it's just like, that's not the people you'd necessarily pick to be a group of victims if you'd pick anybody.
Right.
But I don't see it that way. I mean, I think if you just think about art, right? Not about, if you think about art, I think that art is always more interesting and deeply felt and affecting when it's coming out of reality. So like art, I think one of the biggest problems we have with art, and one reason Occupy Museums has focused on institutions, is the way that art is framed, and this mythology that's told about art is really, it does a lot of damage, basically, because it takes the reality out of the picture. It takes the struggles out of the picture. It takes what you can learn from it, and it's kind of like selling you the aesthetics, which is more like a class-based kind of, based thing. It's selling you the mythology, usually of like the male, like the few artists that usually came from privilege and were geniuses. And I think, and for me, it's always been more interesting I've always gotten more out of art when I learned about who the artists were.
Totally.
Like to understand that artists, like that artist like went through the Japanese internment camp, and then like learned and then was affected by that, and like went into, like, that's where their materials come from. I can't remember the name of the artist, who's a famous California artist I'm referring to, but like there's so many artists, when you sort of get something about their life, the work kind of comes to life. And I think that debt is actually, I think actually builds on what the art people are making. So we're not just looking at people's art and saying, oh, this is just a little random detail. I mean, I'm affected by people's artwork itself. And for me, the fact that people are living these many different kinds of lives in reality, time to go to the studio or in their house and make these drawings and stuff, it's just like, it really moves me a lot. And I love the art that's coming in.
Yes. And everything that you're saying, it's so powerful, and it really also brings to light for me, because I come from the moving image side of things. I'm obsessed with the experience of the audience, and there is for those folks if you talk to any audience member who sees their experience up on the screen for the first time, it can be transcendent and performative and absolutely extraordinary. And there is a bond and a connection between the artist and the subject that often visual artists who are making, ephemera and paintings and other kinds of things, it's an experience they often don't get with with their audience. And yet it's where narratives live everywhere. And in the experience of the artist making a piece, from inside their house, and the experience of debt, what it calls to mind is the self-censorship that many, many filmmakers go through just because there is no money there, and certain stories will not get told. And the debt they carry is the boundary through which they can no longer be a storyteller. And I think the need for some interdisciplinary conversations, I think, could be amazing, because if there were radio producers and audio artists and filmmakers in on a call like this, people would want to step up and start those story collections. And I keep imagining there's technology now where as you walk towards a work of art, the presence of the body can trigger an audio track. And we've been starting to experiment. The idea that you could, as you get closer to the work inside the wall, you could start hearing the voices of that artist or those for whom the work is about. There's a lot of potential there of how narratives get interwoven, but it would take that kind of collaboration. But I think it's incredible what you guys are doing. Can we, as we get closer towards the kind of wrapping up, I think, where people's attention spans will be for this conversation, can you talk a little bit about how, if there are artists who want to get involved and they're out there listening to this, what are good first steps for them to engage with you all and have their project potentially be included?
Well, so first of all, the questionnaire submission deadline for consideration in the Whitney show itself in the physical space is December 9th. And that's coming up quick. That's only a few days away. And you can find that by going to www.debtfair.org. That's DEBTFAIR.org. And then clicking on the participating artist information tab on the top there. And that'll take you to a page that says a little bit more about the project itself. And that'll give you a link to the questionnaire. The questionnaire it's an online questionnaire on submittable.com. And there you'll fill out, it'll take about 20 minutes. You'll fill out information about, information that some of which will be shared publicly, some of which will be kept private, and you'll upload images of your work. And all of that information will be put on the website. After December 9th, anybody who puts information on the questionnaire will automatically be joined into debtfair.org. And that information will also be shown in the museum, like I said, but won't be for consideration. Won't be in consideration for showing in the physical space. And so debtfair.org is essentially an organizing platform for artists in debt resistance. Essentially, that's how we see it. And like Noah said, we're not about let's say propagating a victim narrative. Quite the opposite. We see this as like an opportunity for solidarity among a huge swath of people who carry debts, and all our debts are connected, and our debts make us strong, in fact. And right now we have over $16 million represented on the Debtfair, in the Debtfair community, and we're growing that. The more money that's represented there, the more leverage we have. So the more people are part of this community, the better.
Oh, what's your, as you spin this out into its idealized end, what does it look like if Debtfair is actually successful? How is one great entity buying our debt and forgiving it? Are we leveraging that for policy shifting? If this is good, if this is all towards a way to make our lives collectively better and the lives of the world better, what happens from all of this? And anyone can answer that.
Imani, want to say something?
I think that one of the biggest problems
That's a tough one.
the relationship between the banks and financial asset managers and just the finance system in general and the individual American, to speak specifically about this country, is the complete lack of accountability and the complete lack of a sense of responsibility and connection. We as individuals, of course, have a ton of responsibility. We have to pay our debt payments on time, or else we get hounded. We have to keep our account balances so where we can pay our bills. We have a lot of responsibility. But in terms of the other way around, what we've seen become clear, with the financial collapse of 2008 is that there is no reciprocity there. And banks are looking for every opportunity, and hedge funds and asset management corporations are looking for every opportunity to extract as much money as possible from every given situation. Even if it means the collapse of a country like Argentina, even if it means the bankruptcy of a city, of an entire city of people, like Detroit. And we need to see a little bit of accountability from these banks and these credit card companies. And so some things that have, we know that in 2008, we forgave the banks. We declared that they were more important to maintaining the structure and the foundation and the sustainability of this country than the people who make up this country. We declared that the banks were citizens of a higher importance than the human citizens of this country. We need to see the banks actually giving something back to us. And I think that there's something really powerful that happens when people start to recognize that they are what holds a bank together. A bank could not exist if it didn't have all of our money and our debt. And we are the ones who make up the bank. So when we have a bundle of artists who are all in debt to JP Morgan Chase, say people around the country, even who don't participate in this iteration of Debtfair, but who join into the Debtfair platform, and we recognize that we have this growing number of artists, this growing debt amount, all from JP Morgan Chase. What kind of power does that actually create? JP Morgan Chase should be, on the very most basic level, they have one of the largest art collections in the world. They should buy this art. They should buy this bundle, and they should support some of the artists who have helped JP Morgan Chase be what it is today. That's how reciprocity works. Banks like to talk about that they are a part of the community, the financial community. They like to talk about financial community. Communities require reciprocity. Societies require reciprocity. And if we want to see banks as a part of our nation, as a part of our society, and not as rogue actors who need to be expunged, then we need to see that degree of reciprocity. So, I think that this recognition of our collective power and of the fact that we are all connected through these banks could be incredibly powerful.
Thank you for that. Imani, has there ever been a situation during the timeline, the arc of the development of this project, that artists and bankers and economists have actually sat down together to look at work and talk through ideas? Has it been kind of on two different sides of the aisle for?
I'd say we're kind of different. I mean, we're organizing now, right? Mm-hmm. So like Saul Alinsky said, there's two kinds of power, who's the famous organizer in the 20th century. There's two kinds of power. There's money and there's people, right? So we're on the people side. I mean, banks are on the money side. They are currently in charge of the world, but it's actually unstable times, and it looks like we met in Occupy Wall Street. We're pretty optimistic people, I think. we think that there can be change. And now we're all of a sudden in this really horrible moment with Donald Trump. I mean, just unthinkably horrible.
Yeah.
It has effects on the debt because he's talking about everything's going to get deregulated. Probably means that interest rates will creep up and debt will be offered to, less people so that they can make more money and less risk and all this stuff. But it's a great time to organize. And that's what you don't see power until you see organization. And as soon as you have strong organizing, you see power. That's what Imani is talking about. And there's not very many in the landscape that we're living. There's not that many examples that we'd like to see of people power, like being able to drive back money power. We would have hoped to see it in Greece after the Ohi vote, but unfortunately they got, their arms got twisted behind their back. But we did see it in Iceland, right? So the Icelandic people, it's a small country, but the banks there did the same thing that they did in all the other countries. And basically people said no, and they rejected it. They wrote their own constitution online as a collective document. And one of our friends, we know the person who's the PM, who's the Pirate Party person, Brigitte Jonsdottir, she's an occupier. And basically, that's a very small example, but it shows you that, when you have people, you can push back and say, no, you don't get to play these games. The only reason the banks get to extract the debts from Puerto Rico, hedge funds get to just do crazy deals with Puerto Rico and Argentina is because they just have a lot more power. So I think right now at this unstable time, we're going for the organizing, and that's definitely stage one. And then I think, as Imani said, I can imagine that the banks are going to have to pay up or abolish a lot of debts if the organizing is successful.
God, that would be a miracle, and that would be amazing. I'm speechless. It's so, as coming as a non-organizer, learning and really and acknowledging that, in my mind, it's always been that artists and organizers and artists and scientists and artists and others think differently, and they work in different paces. And, scientists look for questions, artists or scientists look for answers, artists look for questions. Activists have always looked for something, these certain kinds of changes, and artists are always taking a step back and introspecting. But in the way that you all are organizing this, it feels, I feel the people power that you're talking about, and I feel the kind of rise of this conversation leading to something that could not be more urgent than right now. And the time might be exactly right. If there's anything positive about what's going on post-election, it's a rise in interest around this work. So I think if are there any last folks things want to say to the listening public?
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you for hosting us, and we'd like to collaborate together down the road.
Let's please do that. I think that we will, we'll take this, I'll edit it, I'll throw it out to you guys if you want to do any editing of it, or we can just put it out there whole hog. But I think we should put it out with some context. I've been writing quotes down as we've been talking, and the idea of enticing people to take a listen to this, to submit their work, to get involved in the movement if they're not already in it. So that we can deepen the power of, the collective voice through this work. When is the dates of the actual biennial? That's something.
The opening is March 7th.
Great.
17th.
17th.
All right. I so want to be there, and I'm going to make sure we do it. All right. Good.
That's great. Oh, that'd be great.
Oh my God, are you kidding? My mom's apartment is always open. People can sleep on the floor, sleep on the floor, whatever it takes. Yeah, no, I'm going to be there. You guys, thank you. Thank you for the inspiration for today. And I'll send all this to you by the end of the day for sure. And Imani, feel better.
Thank you.
All right, good. All right, good. Talk soon.
Bye.
Okay, bye.